One of the ways to encourage students to use Piazza is to encourage them with positive feedback. So we could go up and we could have the student answer and we could mark it as a good answer. This one here, the question asked, why do you use formals and not to? As we did in the balanced half reaction, the student answer is already talking about part C. And sometimes the question up top will be labeled B, as it is here, and really be about C, so this would be a reasonable response. It's not particularly insightful, it's not particularly great, so I wouldn't mark it as good answer, it's just kind of figuring out which part they're talking about. But you could go back and endorse good answer, and I'll show you one where I've done that in just a moment. Or you could go and check if this is a really good question you think it's important for people to pay attention to. So what we'll do is we'll go down and highlight on the left, and we're going to look for a question where I've said good answer. A good answer shows up and the question is a student answer with a yellow check. So let's go to this question. We'll click on it. And this question was about the variables Q and K. And I came down here and the response is the trick to parts E through H is realized the instructions mentioned immediately after the temperature is decreased. The student is right on with how you want to think about it, right on with their response. So what I did is I said it was a good answer, and so I can undo my good answer now if I wanted to, but since I did mark it with a good answer, it says that I endorsed the answer, and then over here it says, all right, there's a student response and the instructor endorsed it. So that means I don't have to type anything, I don't have to come up with my own answer. Student answered the question effectively well, and that's great. And students like getting good answers, and it saves me the time of doing anything else. There is a follow-up. You cannot endorse good answers on follow-up. Sometimes I will. Sometimes I would go in and say, hey, great answer, thanks for posting, and occasionally go in and do that as well. So it just encourages students' participations. It also lets them know that you're reading what they wrote and that you're in there and that you're monitoring it. So it keeps them on task and it keeps them honest. So I like doing that as well. One last thing. If you want to search for a post, so I try to remind students to look for questions before they post them. Since there's lots of questions and I don't want to have to mark them as duplicate, and there's no reason to answer the same question twice. So students can come up here to this window and search for prep, final exam. Let's say we had a question about question 1, page 1. And so they can search. It's going to go do the search for me, and it's going to pull up the relevant subjects. Here's the subjects, and it's going to come down here, final exam. There is a page 1 question 2, and it pulls in, this takes the search a little bit broader because there's not a direct match. You kind of scroll down things that might be relevant as you're looking. But generally, if they're using the right format, they're going to be able to find their question. And this one, the question 1, page 1 is pretty general because you're going to get any Q with a 1 next to it in the number and any P with a 1 next to it. So that's going to give them a lot of responses. The most relevant ones are at the top, as you would expect, that prep final exam. So they can scroll through that and see if their question's already been asked. It works a little bit better with the homework. So if we do homework 34, I can sort by folder, say, oh, I have a question about homework 34. And homework 34, only question 5's been posted. I have a question about question 2. So I'll make a new post and I will ask my question. The homework folders, since my homeworks have only about 10 problems each, the homework folders stay small enough that you can see all the homework questions for a single homework at one time. 10 questions show up. My practice exams, which I call my prep, you get lots of questions, and that takes a while to scroll through. And so that's where searching becomes important. Or say if you wanted to search for a topic, like you're having a hard time with buffers and you want to search for buffer, you could do a search and it will call up the word buffer in the questions first, and then it will look for any questions that are about buffers. So you may go back and review those and say, hey, these are where people were confused about buffers. I'm going to go back and look at these questions as I study and get ready for the final exam. So that's pretty much how you can filter. Again, you can come up here and you can click all the unread questions, or you can click all, and then you can sort by your folders up top. So any questions that there were about lectures come up here. My students spring term actually had a lot of lecture questions. Usually they're not as many, but they had a lot, which is great. And so you can sort your questions. You can search for one. You want to use the good question, use the instructor response,